Hi friends, welcome back to Feed the Sheep podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Keeling of Balanced Ruminant Grazers. My husband Ryan and I are a scrappy couple working hard to build a sheep flock of Australian whites in south central Kansas. We have 4 small kids and have found ourselves time and time again leaning into God through all the ups and downs of farming. My mission with this podcast is to help you and your family build a profitable sheep flock. Can't wait to bring you along as we learn from others in the sheep industry. Now let's get to talking sheep. Hi sheep friends, welcome back to Feed the Sheep podcast. I'm your host Kelsey Keeling, and we are back with another interview of the Vice President of the AAWSBA Association. I'm very excited to talk to David Krider today. It was a great interview, and I'm excited for all the knowledge that he brought to you guys through this interview. David's had sheep for a long time, and it's just great to hear as a new sheep producer all the things that he's seen in the Australian whites and what this breed is going to bring to the United States and to sheep producers that are wanting to make a profit and make a living off of it. So I'm so excited for you guys to listen. Let me get out of here and enjoy the interview. David, thank you so much for joining me this evening. So I've been excited
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I've been excited to talk sheep with you for a while. We had a phone call way back when I was looking for a ram. And I just told somebody the other day, when I talked to you on the phone then, we talked for like an hour and a half and it was like really late. And so hopefully we don't, keep you, I don't want to keep you too late. But yeah, I'm just excited to chat sheep with you. So can you tell people sorry.
I was going to say, this is one of my favorite subjects, so you probably have to cut me off.
Yeah, no, me too. That's why I love doing this and talking to people. And my husband's like, why do you just want to talk sheep all the time? I was like, I don't know. It's just something I like. So, why don't you tell people that are listening to the podcast who you are and where you're from, and then eventually how you got started into sheep. So,
okay. I'm David Krider. My wife is Connie. We're originally from Minnesota, and originally she was from a horse training background, big arenas and world champion reining horses and things like that. And I was heavily invested and interested in the sled dog racing. And when we got together, we naturally gravitated to the country. And because we were in the country and raising small children, we decided, we'd have a better source of food. So we went into, chickens and rabbits and milk goats, and then that led us to sheep. And through the process, we ended up moving to Colorado. And in Colorado is where we actually began a small commercial sized sheep venture. And that was with polypays and Rambouillet Columbia type ewes. And back when the wool was still paying a pretty good bunch of money, all the neighbors that were running sheep, if you had less than 1,000 sheep, you were a hobby farmer.
oh my goodness.
So everybody, all the, what I'd call the professional ranchers, they would have 3,000 to 20,000 and have government leases, mountain leases, and so on. They were calling all their buyers when we were out there, trying to get the price up to 48 cents a pound. And they were selling 80-pound feeder lambs in the fall. And those lambs would usually go to either feedlots or alfalfa fields in Arizona or New Mexico or Colorado. And the buyers were offering 46 cents, and they were trying to get it up to 48 because that was their break even. So we decided if that was one of the lowest prices in history on sheep, that would be a good time to get in. So we started buying sheep.
Okay.
And when we had a few sheep, few being 40 or 50, we didn't want to lose any lambs. So we were pretty much hovering over everything as it was being born and moving it into the barn and in pens, and we had prolific sheep, and so we were able to squeeze out about a 230% live weaned lamb. And that was really good, but it was a lot of work. Okay. We didn't have enough land in Colorado, so we moved to the most grass for the dollar we could find, which was northern Missouri. When we moved to northern Missouri, we expanded the flock up to about 250. At 250, we couldn't hover over every lamb, and we didn't have big enough facilities for that. So we went to pasture lambing. When we went to pasture lambing, it was a whole different game. Now, our best ewes were our worst ewes on the pasture. We didn't want triplets on the pasture because that led to a lot of problems. You know, we'd say goodnight to them at dark, 7 o'clock or so, and you wouldn't see them till 6 or 7 the next morning, and anything can happen in the meantime. So we were heavy into grazing, 110%. So much so that we started a electric fence water supply business in order to get better products and be able to do what we wanted to do. Parasites became a big problem. In Colorado, with a 12-inch rainfall area, parasites really weren't a problem. In Missouri, where we had more humid conditions, parasites became a problem, and we started getting an education in that. So we selected for parasite resistance, and after a few years, we had sheep that were about as parasite resistant as we could get them. Management is a big key to that also, but we were also running a seasonal grass dairy and the fence business. And to give you an idea of how we were able to expand, we had about 240 acres, and we had 250 ewes, 350 meat goats, and 60 head of dairy cattle. Everything lambed, kidded, and calved in the spring, as well as the fence business taking off. So we got busier and busier and busier, and as the kids grew up and went off on their own pursuits, we just got to the point where we had to start peeling out different things. So we started with selling the sheep because they were a very nice flock and parasite resistant. We had a lot of people wanting them, so they sold in a day. And then that felt so good, we sold all the dairy cattle, and that just left us with the fencing business and the goats. At that time, the cottons were just starting to, come on the scene. They were around, but they weren't really well placed or there weren't a lot of them at the time. So the wool market had started going downhill. So we wanted to get an animal that didn't have to be sheared. That led us to, because of the fence business, we were able to travel to several different countries. And while we were in Australia, I saw some Damara sheep, a fat-tailed sheep that, totally shedding sheep, looks more like a goat than a sheep. And that really pushed our interest in a shedding sheep, one that could get its entire nutritional requirements off of a pasture. So we imported Damara sheep. They have this big, huge fat tail in the back, which makes them be able to cheerfully go a week or two without water and not suffer much. They live off that tail like a camel. We weren't able to get the type of carcass we want. So after a few years of breeding them in and out and down, we sold that flock. I always wanted a do-over on the Damara because I thought I could get better genetics and it might work. And that was in the back of my mind. And then I ran into the Australian white. And the more I read about what Graham had been achieving with the Australian white, the more I decided that he just saved me about 14 years of trial and error and breeding. Yeah. He had gotten to the point that I wanted to get to, but he had done all the hard work. He's blazed the trail.
Yeah.
So being a bit skeptical, I don't believe everything I read. I tried to find some in the U.S. and wasn't able to obtain any. So I called him, got together with Luke and Sonia, and we were able to start bringing in the current genetics. They were expensive. It was a big, it's big leap of faith when you're spending a large chunk of money and basically on pictures and videos and the word on the man you're talking to. But I have to say, those are the best lambs I have ever raised. And we've raised thousands of sheep, all different kinds of sheep. And those were the very best lambs and still are the very best lambs we've ever raised. They did everything that he said they would do. I'd go out to do chores that, should take me 20 minutes to a half an hour. And it'd take me about an hour and a half because I'd find myself just sitting there admiring these sheep. I've never had sheep that performed as well as they did. And I think performance is the key. Mm-hmm. They do perform. They not only have all the performance characteristics that most people and myself are looking for. They're prolific, they grow fast, they're muscular, they shed out. They're just, they're easygoing, they're easy to have around. They're just, there's very little to try and dislike about these sheep. So once we had the first batch on the ground, then I was thinking, well, we need more to select from, because I really feel that the Australian white can revitalize the sheep industry in the United States. Mm-hmm. Because we were able to travel a lot of different countries and see a lot of different setups and farms and ranches and livestock and genetics and so on, I had a lot to compare them with. And no matter where I looked, and information I pulled up back from the past, the Australian white, hands down, is the best animal that I've ever been able to see or raise. And they're not plentiful enough. I would really like it if we had thousands of them in the United States. The more we have, the more popular they're going to be. Everybody that's ever looked at one that I know of walks away wanting one. Unfortunately, they're expensive now because of quality and availability. But as they grow, as we get more and more on the ground, and more people are able to participate in raising this animal, and we haven't even got to the eating experience. The fact that they're very likely the best meat you'll ever eat. I just see unlimited future for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's what Ryan and I, we're only 3 years into sheep. So 3 years ago when we were faced with trying to pick out a ram, we were going to go with Katahdin just because that's what our ewes were and stuff. And then we had the option of going with an Australian white ram, and we weighed the difference and we're like, let's just pull the trigger and see if this, it pays off. Why not? Back then it was a $1,500 difference probably for an Australian white ram versus like a nice Katahdin ram. But that's one of the questions that are like, I guess what I was going to say was, we're only 3 years into sheep, and like when we see them, we're like, wow, like we don't really have a whole bunch to compare to, I guess. But what would you say to somebody who's like, they're starting in sheep as well, and they don't want to pull the trigger on spending a lot on an Australian white ram? Like, is it worth it in the end, do you think, to invest now?
Well, I spent a lot of money getting those lambs on the ground, and if I had to do it all over, I would do it, and I would probably do it sooner. Mm-hmm. The animals are just so much better than everything else I see now. Now, we've had and seen some very good sheep, and there are some very good meat sheep out there. Unfortunately, most of them have wool. Ile-de-France is a wonderful animal, and it's an animal that they can bring up to 140 pounds in 5 months, and they milk well, and they breed out of season. They have all the nice production qualities, but they've got a lot of wool. So in order to find an animal that sheds and sheds well, there's very few choices when you want a saleable carcass also. There's a lot of sheep that people promote as being parasite resistant, which usually means they're small and don't produce much of a carcass. To find an animal that, well, our top end ram out of the first group of embryos we got on good hay in 135 days weighed 144 pounds.
Yeah.
I've never had an animal of any kind on forage that was able to gain that much. Our best Polypay Rambouillet Columbia lambs on pasture in northern Missouri, and granted it was clover and fescue mostly, but on pasture our problem was we lamb in the spring, and in the fall, about October, when you're hoping to sell them all, they were 80 pounds. It was very difficult to get them over 80 pounds on grass. And that was, you're talking about a 6, 7, 8 month period. The Australian whites, I mean, they blow by 80 pounds right past weaning practically. It's just an animal that really checks all the boxes. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it in that breed, like the composite that Graham put together, that makes them excel in the growth?
Well, when you go back and look at any meat sheep, anything that has any type of a carcass, you'll find Dorset in the background. Dorset is kind of the key point from every meat sheep that's pretty much ever been developed. So then Graham has, world famous Dorsets. I mean, he's got Dorsets that'll be 80 pounds at 2 months old. I mean, he's got massive Dorsets. So the Dorset is growth and muscle. Of course, the White Dorper is growth and muscle. And then you throw in the Texel, which is growth and muscle. And then the Van Roy is probably one of the most prolific sheep that you'd ever run across. And the Van Roy was from a blackhead Persian and probably some type of a Dorset in the background and a couple other breeds. But it's an animal that it's very difficult to find one that's not bred. They'll get bred, nursing their lambs. I mean, so it's a highly prolific, very clean shedding animal. So when he added that, he got the prolificity, he got the intermuscular fat, and he's got the year-round breeding abilities, and it brings to the table a lot of really good qualities. So when the Van Roy is one of the things that they added to the White Dorper in order to get a little bit more shedding ability on it in Australia. So when he put those four together, and then he was able to select, we talk about, large flocks, farm flocks being 300, 400, 500, and range flocks being 5,000 or so. Well, they have that type of range flock over there. I mean, they have thousands of sheep they can select from, and selection is probably as important as genetics. So if you take 1,000 sheep and you pick out your best 100, and then you put those through some more testing, and you pick out your best 20, and then you use those 20 to provide the embryos that you're going forward with to put back into 1,000 or 2,000 ewes, and then every year he's able to get more consistent and better quality animals. And it's not a very old breed. I mean, the whole breed was probably started 12, 14 years ago. And in that period of time, they've been able to cover a whole lot of ground. So right now we get to a point where the embryos hatch out, or if you have purebreds and you're breeding them, when the lambs hit the ground, you want to pat yourself on the back, but you're really not doing anything. They do self-replicate. Everything you breed them to pretty much looks a little bit like an Australian white animal. You know, Luke calls my group a diversity test because I've got almost every type of sheep you can think of that I've bred them to. And everything that comes out, whether it was an Ile-de-France or a Dorper or a Katahdin or a Royal White or even some East Frisian milk sheep, no matter what comes out, they have a Australian White look to them. They're really prepotent on that, or else the genetics are so different that they make that stamp on almost everything you put them through. And every generation seems to be better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we only have F1s, but I definitely have seen that stamp that you're talking about in the F1s. You can tell a difference. But do you have F2s on the ground? I can't remember.
This year I'll have some F2s on the ground, and one of my neighbors here was part of the earlier import from about 5 years ago, and he had some F1s that he just bred to our rams this year. So his group will have some F2s on the ground. And when you look through the sheep, you can pretty much pick out the if there's 200 lambs running around out there, you can pretty much pick out the Australian White lambs. I mean, they really do look, their heads, their bodies, the width of their hips. I mean, they really do look Australian White. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's kind of a problem with the Australian White, because the first generation crosses look so good that a lot of people want to use those as rams.
Yeah.
And my friend up the road felt the same way. His first generation lambs looked so good and they grew so fast, he felt he was going to use the current genetics. He was going to use the crosses to breed his commercials because they look so good. And so he did. But that lamb crop wasn't as good as their parents. They didn't produce as well because he was running out of Australian White genetics. Instead of 50%, they were 25%, which meant 75% of that lamb was from a conglomeration of other genes. So that there was, no consistency, and you didn't have that growth and the muscling that you would expect to have from an Australian White.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, being new to sheep, I didn't understand all that. And so I'll leave a link in the description box or in the show notes about that article that I think Sana put it on the AAWSBA Facebook page that talks about the dairy genes. Did you read that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that way people can read up more on it and kind of educate themselves, because it was mind blowing to me. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. What about like going forward? What do you see like is going to be the best thing for the breed, bringing in genetics and like building strong lines over here? You think just always making sure we have new genetics coming over from Graham, or?
Well, Graham is the most dependable source of genetics.
Yeah.
He's kind of the brains behind the outfit. Graham and his brother, I believe his brother passed away, and he always attributes a lot to his brother. But I would personally like to see renewed genetics. He's made such progress in a short period of time. He's a very important cog in the wheel. So I would like to participate with the progress that he's making. So I would like to continue to expand what we have as much as possible, because we need more animals on the ground. We can't even begin to touch the market that's building on these. If we can keep embryos, and if possible, he doesn't sell semen on his rams. He just sells embryos. And it's getting difficult to get those because they're in such high demand. And the meat division of his business is growing so rapidly, they have to use a lot of their sheep to provide animals for the meat trade. So I would like to continue to get embryos and semen if possible, just to keep us at the forefront of the breed. But more importantly, we have to expand what we have. We have companies that are interested in Australian white proprietary dishes, different restaurants and things that want to have a specific dish with, their name on it, a branded product. And they've all everybody that's done any testing has all chosen Australian white. Well, we couldn't even begin to service. If you took every Australian white in the United States, we couldn't begin to service a very small group if they wanted, one lamb per store a week, which really wouldn't be much. I mean, there's no way we could even come close. So if we can expand the base here. Now, in general, the sheep population is going down in the United States. The Australian white is, I believe, a key ingredient to make it go the other way. If we could get thousands of these out there rather than hundreds, they'd be more economical for the person getting in, and we would have a much larger market and dependable market to service.
Yeah. Talk about the meat quality a little bit. Have you tasted? I mean, I'm assuming you've had F1s at least.
Well, I ordered the Magra, the branded meat product from Graham, and of course it was very expensive.
Yeah,
and,
I bet.
Yeah, because again, I'm quite skeptical, and if you read any breed publication, by the time you get through reading the breed publication or the pamphlet, the thought in your mind is, boy, that's great. That must be the best thing out there, because they're taunting all the pluses and sometimes, not completely explaining any of the negatives. So I was quite skeptical. Now, we've had lamb in 17 different countries and all over the United States. And most of the lamb we've had was good. Some of it was really good. Most of it was good. We've had a couple that was just god awful. And unfortunately, both of those were in the United States. Every other country I've had lamb in has always been at least good. No matter what, and a lot of them I didn't know what kind of lamb it was. You're either at somebody's house eating it or you're ordering it out of a restaurant. It doesn't tell you what breed it is or anything, but it was always good. So because of all the notoriety about the low fat melting point and high omega-3s and how it's the Wagyu of lamb world, I was quite skeptical about that. And so I ordered a cut of lamb, and it came frozen. Now, this lamb that I ordered had been frozen for about 3 years. So I didn't know it at the time, but if I would have known that, my expectations might not have been really high. But got the lamb, thawed it out, baked it like we'd bake any other type of lamb. And when I cut into it and put the first bite in my mouth, the first thought in my head was, I want another bite. That was exceptionally good. It wasn't just the best lamb that I had ever tasted. It was quite possibly the best meat I have ever had. And we've had a lot, we've traveled a lot, and we've had ostrich and all kinds of exotic meats and in a lot of different places, and some of it good, some of it really good, some of it average, but that was really, really, really good. So I thought, well, maybe I just got a one-off thing. So I kind of tightened up my belt and ordered another cut of meat. Yeah, I think I ordered a leg the first time, and the second time I think I ordered a loin or something. Anyway, smaller, more expensive but smaller. And when that came, I was trying to prove them wrong. Really, I felt the first one was so good they can't do it on all of them. This can't be as good. So I was kind of thinking that I was going to be more disappointed in this, and it was at least as good, if not better. So after those experiences, I felt the guy really is telling the truth. I mean, this is the best lamb I have ever had. So that brought me a long way towards believing what he said. You know, you're talking to a guy that's, 7,000 miles away that you've never met, and about spending tens of thousands of dollars to hopefully get something shipped over that you might like and might not like. So you're taking an awful lot on the man's word. And after tasting the meat and talking to him a few times, and it was a rocky road. I mean, there was holdups. It was supposed to be here this month, but it ended up 6 months later. And I mean, there was a lot of hurdles to jump over, and it's an expensive process. But again, if somebody said, would you do it all over again? I would absolutely do it again, and I'd do it quicker if I could.
Yeah. Where did you order? Did you just order it off? Does Graham have a farm website? I haven't checked that out.
No, he had a shipment of meat he had shipped over to Fagerman.
Oh, okay.
And Fagerman had the Magra meat there at the time.
Okay.
So I ordered it from Daniel, actually.
There you go. Well, I'm so glad that you got to try it. Oh, I wonder if he still has some. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really good. We're probably we've got a couple of F1s we're gonna process. I want to get some carcass data on them, and we'll eat those. And I'm critically looking at all my ram lambs because you know how expensive those little suckers are. But I would really like to eat one.
Yes, definitely.
So if one of them slips up somewhere, why he may end up on the dinner table.
That's funny. That's funny. Being new to sheep, I don't know. How do you do the carcass data stuff? Do you go to a university to have that done, or? I'm curious.
The type of carcass data I'm initially talking about is the way it cuts out and the amount of meat to bone ratio and things like that. Now, a good carcass data, if you end up with a 62 to 64%, meat, that's really good. Most sheep are closer to 50 to 60%, I believe. Now, some really, really good carcasses, and Ile-de-France has some really, really good carcasses, they might be 64. But so if another interesting thing is when we're talking carcass in the United States, fat lamb has always been, a big lamb because they're usually fed. You're either in a feedlot somewhere, and they used to bring them up to 128 pounds. But the processing plants, it costs just as much to process a 120-pound lamb as it does a 140-pound lamb. So they wanted more meat. So now a fat lamb is 140, 144 pounds. Well, that's in the U.S. When you go to other countries, especially countries that produce and eat a lot of lamb, like Australia and New Zealand, their fat lamb is 80 to 100 pounds. So, because that's usually a grass lamb. Most animals that are designed for pasture, the sheep in particular, you can get them to 80 pounds in a relative short period of time, 4, 5, 6 months on grass, depending on where you're at and what they're eating, you can get them to that weight. And they want to, being in the livestock business, they want to turn them over as fast as possible. When we were in New Zealand, they weigh their animals, weekly, because if the animal hits, the goal is an 80-pound lamb. If the lamb hits 80 pounds, it's sold. And as an example, let's say it's $1 a pound. If they're selling the lamb for $1 a pound at 80 pounds, they get $80. If it's 75 pounds, they might get $75. So they want 80 pounds. if it's 82 pounds, they might only get $78. They get docked. They don't want it over 80 pounds. In Australia, the typical butcher size is about 80 pounds. They'll take them up to 100 pounds, but they don't want them overly fat either. So they feel that if they go over 120 pounds, the lambs might be too fat. And so it's a different class of animal, and it's a different mindset than the United States. We have feed yards and large companies that make a lot of money feeding lambs, so they want them bigger. In countries that eat a lot of lamb, they want them quicker, so they want to have a 5-6 month old lamb at 80 pounds off of grass, and that's the most economical way, and that way they can get at least a couple crops a year that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the gentleman that I was talking to, he sells to Superior in Colorado, and he was asking me specifically on a certain cut of the lamb, how thick it would be. And I was like, I have no idea, because I think that's what Superior wants.
Yeah.
They want such a big cut on whatever chop or whatever it is that. So I didn't know how they find that out. So
the people that I know that have contracts with Superior are producing 144 pound lambs, because they want a large loin, a large leg. They want, again, it costs them just as much to process that 144 pounder as it would a 100 pounder. So they want, by the time it goes through the line, and they set up their lines for that, so if you had a 100 pounder going through there, it kind of wouldn't fit. If you had a 160 pounder going through there, it may not fit. So they're set up for speed and profit, and that's the size they want. They pay well if you can do that, but not many people can do that. We seem to have a direction towards ultra small lambs. In the last few years, everybody's trying to produce a 40 or 50 pound lamb, because that's what paid the most at the auction barn.
Yeah.
I still don't know what they're doing with all those 40 or 50 pound lambs, because feed was too high to feed them. The lambs were too small to really provide any meat. I mean, what are they going to have? 6 pounds of meat on them or something? Mm-hmm. So I don't know why or where they would go when they're paying $3-4 a pound, for a 40 or a 50 pound lamb. I think the logical market in the United States in any production unit is about 120 pound lamb, because that's something that with this breed we can do on grass, and we can do it in 4.5 months, which is very profitable.
Yeah, definitely. You recently moved from Missouri to Alabama. Can you talk about like the stress on the sheep, or what you noticed with the different grazing and stuff?
And that's a very interesting story there, because in Missouri, mostly cool season grasses, mostly fescue, and fescue and clover, and we would kind of frost seed in ryegrass and clover to kind of dilute the fescue. So we started with the sheep there, and then we needed more land, so we found more grass in Alabama. And we're from Minnesota, but we keep moving south the older we get. So that was kind of the general direction we were going. So I was quite worried about the warm season base of grass. I didn't have a lot of history with warm season. In Missouri, when you talk Johnson grass, it's a dirty word. I mean, if you got Johnson grass in your hay field, they want to get rid of it, or they'll sell you that hay cheaper because it's not as good as, the other grass hay they have. So Johnson grass was kind of a dirty word. Well, I've got a farm that's loaded in Johnson grass. And when I first saw it, it was 7 feet tall. It was like going through a jungle. It was like trees out there. I thought, boy, what am I going to do to get rid of this stuff? Well, the people that had the place before me, they just hate it every year, and they'd haul it off in 1,600-pound round bales. So I kept thinking, well, I've got to do something to have a little better quality forage. I was quite worried about that. So I've got these sheep that I absolutely love, and the best sheep I've ever had in my life, and I'm moving them to an area that I think is going to be horrible for them. So the first thing I brought down was the rams, because they had the lowest need for nutrition. So I brought the rams down thinking that, well, it's going, I might have to feed them something, or they're going to go backwards. And so, and it's a 9-hour trailer ride to get here. So they're in the trailer. I loaded them up the night before, left early in the morning, so they're in the trailer about, 14 hours or 16 hours or something. And I get down here, unload them, thinking that, well, they're not going to want to eat this stuff. And they're, you think of the worst all the time. I unloaded them. They walked around, stuck their nose down, started eating, and never looked back. They didn't go backwards one bit. The only thing that had a problem with moving livestock from Missouri to Alabama was me. I worried about it all the time, but they proved me wrong. After I moved the rams down, then I brought the ewes down, the same age. By now they're about a year old. I brought the ewes down. Now I'm going to breed them down here, and I bring the ewes down, and same thing. I turn them out in the pasture, and they look around a little bit. It probably took them about 3 minutes before they stuck their head down and just started eating. It's a characteristic of the breed. And I don't know if they get it from the Dorper or what, because Dorpers are pretty good eaters. Wherever they go, they just start eating. They may sniff it, they may lick it, and then they'll eat it. So they're almost non-selective grazers. We got multiflora rose up in Missouri, which wasn't my favorite. And we've got some shrubs and brush and stuff down here that's full of little stickers and stuff that isn't their favorite. But everything else that's edible, they just eat it, and they do well on it. Johnson grass is fattening them up. I'm looking at Johnson grass with a whole new light now. If I can keep it under 4 feet tall, they do really well on it. And I thought that was going to be my downfall, but geez, I kind of like it now.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, we have our rams in some Johnson grass right now, so that's interesting. I'll have to go check and see if they go towards that when we move them on there. I haven't seen that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I've had a couple people, I don't know if you could comment on this. A couple people asked me about the Australian white going north, like into northern states. How do you think that they would do? Like, cause they're from Australia, so they probably, do good in Missouri. I mean, Alabama is definitely probably harsher than Missouri or Kansas, but what about northern states?
Well, again, I'm from Minnesota, and the last 7 years in Minnesota was up in Ely on the Canadian border because of sled dog racing. And in Ely, it will hit 40 below zero every day in the month of January. And the records are like 52 below zero. And we had goats up in Ely. So animals can adapt to almost anything if they have, the equipment to do it with. The Australian white, although it is a full shedding sheep, it has a coat like a German Shepherd in the wintertime. It has a thick undercoat that doesn't, the weather doesn't seem to bother him at all. I sold Australian white to a fellow in Idaho, and he came and picked it up with a pickup truck and a wire cage on the back that he put a tarp over, and he's driving 2,000 miles back there now. And it was, about 20 degrees with 30-mile-an-hour winds where he was at, and he was a little worried, and a lot of snow. and he was a little worried about it being able to adapt. And he sent me a picture and called and told me that it didn't miss a beat. He's got wool sheep up there also, and he said it just fit right in. He said it's like it's been here all its life. I don't think 40 below might be a problem without shelter, but I don't think cold weather is going to bother these sheep at all.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Like you said, they can adapt.
Yeah, they don't have long ears like Nubian goats. The long appendages are the stuff that freezes in really cold weather. Animals that are developed in real cold climates, usually have short ears. If it's chickens, they have very short combs. I mean, they have things that don't freeze well. Well, the Australian white, to me, has got kind of a long ear, but it doesn't have an ear that's readily, freezable type of thing. And the rest of their body, I haven't seen any problem with them at all anywhere. While they were in Missouri, it would hit, zero with our worst weather in Missouri. It'll get down to zero or a little bit below zero. And maybe with the wind blowing and with the humidity, it's extremely cold. Our worst weather was about 32 degrees and pouring rain. And that to me, I would much rather it be 10 below zero than 32 degrees and pouring rain, because that is horrible for man and beast. It kills goats and is not comfortable for anything else. So the short story is, I don't think there's any place in the United States that they would not do as well as any other type of sheep.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I just had somebody call me the other day and I was like, I need to ask somebody that who knows more about sheep than I do. I wanted to ask you, okay, so you have some semen available on a ram, is that right?
Yeah, 2 rams.
Okay.
I brought down, I collected the fastest growing, the one that hit 144 pounds in 135 days. Big solid ram, long, wide, and deep. I collected him. And then I also collected a half brother to him that is and he wasn't much lower. I mean, he was about 132 pounds in 135 days. And he's a very well-balanced, nice ram also. I just liked his overall look better, even though he wasn't quite as big as his brother, but he did shed out faster. So the great big guy did shed out, but it took him a little longer. So I did 2 of them just to have them on hand. We get, a lot of people, if you've got less than 40 sheep, buying an expensive ram is a big stretch. But if you want to try the Australian white, if you want to try the purebreds, if you want the full Monty type of thing, then Semen is a less expensive way to go. You can kind of get your foot in the door. And so there wasn't any that I was aware of from this type of genetics in the United States. So I wanted to collect some to make that available for people that wanted to at least try the breed. Because I really, once you try it, you buy it. I mean, you get hooked on it. As soon as you see those lambs hit the ground, you're thinking, why didn't I do this last year?
Yeah. That's what we had our embryo transfers, and even just them hitting the ground, compared to like our F1s, it was like, oh my goodness, this is a totally different lamb. Like you could tell the difference, the size, the mass on them. You're like, wow, this is impressive.
Yeah, they're little bodybuilders when they hit the ground.
Yeah. Do you know what the sire is out of those 2? Was it 90 or was it 10 or that?
19019. He is one of Trump's leading sons for producing muscle and carcass.
Okay. And it was the 1900, and then which one was it?
1900 0019, or no, 0010, I think it is, Ken.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have a playlist on my YouTube so people can walk through, and I have that video, but I wanted to share which RAM it was from so the people could know which one it came out of or what they came out of. So because I don't remember which one. We have one of each. I think wasn't the other one 190090, I think.
The group that you have out of probably was, this is out of the first group of embryos that came in. And
Oh, okay,
so
okay. Okay.
Yeah, so they're out of a RAM was 190010.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Awesome. I don't want to keep you much longer. I wanted to ask, do you guys have a farm page on Facebook that people can follow you?
No, we don't yet. We should have, and we probably will. But right now, they just have to go to David or Connie Krider, and most of our sheep and grandkids will pop up.
Yeah. And I know you post quite a bit on like the Missouri hair sheep page, and so
yeah, I try to keep examples of the sheep visually for people in those different sheep forums, so they know what is there and what is available and just how well they do. Again, I'm not aware of anyone that has ever looked at these sheep and didn't like them. I've probably sold about 8 or 10 ram lambs, and everybody that's purchased one has raved about not just how much they like the ram, but how much they like the lambs out of them. I had a fellow bought a ram, and he bred half his ewes to that ram, and he bred the other half to another expensive white Dorper ram. And he said, just looking at the lambs on the ground, he wished he would have bred them all to the Australian way.
Yeah. Exciting times, exciting.
That is.
Yeah.
It's like opening the gate.
Yeah, exactly. Are you doing any more embryo transfers this year, this fall?
I have a few embryos left. So if the recipients are the problem, I personally think the success and failure ratio is greatly influenced by the quality of the recipient. So if I could find good recipients, I think I've got about 10 or 15 more embryos I could put in. And again, the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. They don't do me any good sitting in a can. I mean, so if they're, I would much rather turn them into whatever amount of lambs I could get out of them. And if possible, we'd purchase additional embryos from Graham next year if he has any he can sell. And so my personal goal is to get as many Australian whites on the ground and into people's hands as possible.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's what Ryan and I were like, okay, let's just wait till the next round comes and then we'll do some more embryo transfers, hopefully. So maybe you can speak to that really quick. After you do the process, we felt like it was like, okay, we've done the hard part, and you went through the embryo transfer process, which is a bit, there's a lot of steps to it, but then we kind of felt relieved that we have done it, and okay, we got one round under our belt. The problem is that we had a good success rate. You could speak to that, couldn't you, David? That it depends on where you go and finding somebody that, and you said the reset.
We've had, very successful inserts, and we've had some horrible ones. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the recips, because the people that were doing it were always, hundreds of miles away. I didn't want to be running back and forth, so I purchased their recips. I felt, their nutrition program, their health program, They're picking out the recips. They're doing all the testing, and they're, the whole thing is under their control. We're not hauling them back and forth or shaking up the mix at all. So we went that way. The best we did, which is good, was 68%. I was tickled with that. The worst we did was 18%, which is extremely depressing.
Oh my
because as you know, all those embryos that didn't take is like flushing a whole bunch of money down the toilet.
Yes.
So 68%, you're happy. 18%, you don't know if you should shoot yourself or let your wife shoot you. It's very depressing.
Yes, I would cry in a corner, I think. Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll go better next time. For sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Fortunately, we had two that were really good and one that was really bad. So I guess if you average it all out, we're close to even. But again, I like the lamb so well. I'm more than willing to live with that. If I could get more lambs just like I got for doing the same thing, I'd probably do it. I certainly don't want 18%, but knowing that can happen, I think that the quality of the stock is worth taking the chance.
Definitely. Last thing, if people are interested in the breed, where would you direct them to go learn more about them?
Caddy Keel's site has got a lot of information on, and he's kind of the person that keeps everything up to date, and a lot of history on there. Other than that, try to find somebody close enough, and there's getting more and more people like yourself that have animals around. Try and find somebody close enough where you can actually go see the animal. I was never able to see one on the ground before I purchased one. There's a lot of pictures and videos, of course, but seeing a live animal and what it looks like, how it's being kept, what they're doing with it, it would be a big benefit. So look around, check with the association to find out if there's any members in their area. Hopefully we'll be able to have something on the page showing where everybody's at, so you can call and try and visit people that have the type of animal you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Get excited about the breed, because they're exciting.
Yeah. If you see it, you're going to want it. I mean, I've had people that, I had a lady that came out and she wanted to buy an F1, and we looked at the F1s, and I showed her the ram lambs, the embryo lambs, which, from an F1, we sell F1 ewe lambs for $350. They should be more, but I'd like people to be able to have them. So we sell really nice F1 ewe lambs for $350 because we have a bunch of them. After looking at the purebred ram lambs, she spent the $4,000 to buy the purebred ram lambs.
Yes, I want that.
Yep, because they could see the future. She could take that ram lamb and she could take it home and she could make all her own F1s and then continue on. So even though it's a whole lot more money, that ram lamb could breed 40 or 50 ewes when he's 6-7 months old. Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, again, thank you so much to David for coming on. love talking to him, love talking sheep. I could talk anybody's ear off on sheep. If you guys have recommendations, I kind of have an idea of what I want this podcast to go through the journey. But if you guys have any recommendations on people that you'd like to hear me interview, please leave them in the comments below or send me an email at brg@balancedruminantgrazers.com. I'll leave it in the show notes or the description box. And we can get those people on the podcast for more people to learn about things with the sheep industry and building a profitable sheep flock. So thank you guys again for listening, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.